I'll never forget the day my parents shattered my dreams. I was 22, fresh out of business school with honors, eager to step into my rightful place in our family's restaurant empire. Montgomery Family Restaurants was more than a business to me, it was a legacy, built from a single diner by my grandfather and expanded into a thriving chain of 50 restaurants across 3 states. Since I was 14, I had worked in every position, from dishwasher to manager, preparing for the day I would help lead the company into the future. That day, I sat at a dinner table expecting a warm welcome into the business. Instead, my father delivered the crushing blow. "The company is going to your sister," he said, as if it were a minor detail. "Sarah has the right attitude for success." I stared at my plate, appetite vanishing. Across the table, my 25-year-old sister smirked. Sarah, who had never worked a single shift in the restaurants, preferring to shop and post about her future CEO aspirations on social media. "But Dad," I protested, my voice unsteady, "I've dedicated years to learning this business. I have a degree. I know every—" "That's enough, Claire," Mom interjected, swirling her wine. Her diamond bracelet clinked against the glass as she exchanged a look with Dad. "Sarah has natural leadership qualities. You're too." She hesitated, as if searching for the right word. Simple. Simple, the word stung. Sarah laughed softly, admiring her manicure. "Claire, let's be honest. You belong on the restaurant floor, not in the boardroom. Someone has to serve the customers, after all." I turned to Grandpa Jack, my last hope. He had always been my biggest supporter, teaching me the ins and outs of the business while we worked side by side in his original diner, but he sat silent, his expression unreadable as he methodically cut his steak. "It's settled," Dad declared. "Sarah takes over next month. You can stay on as a floor manager at the downtown location, if you want." That night, I cried myself to sleep, my years of hard work dismissed like they meant nothing. Months passed, and I watched in silence as Sarah led with arrogance instead of expertise. She spent more time at long lunches with friends than in strategy meetings. When profits declined, Dad defended her every move. Then I met James. He wandered into my restaurant one afternoon, staying for hours as I spoke passionately about operations, employee management, and customer service. He listened, not out of politeness, but genuine interest. A successful tech entrepreneur, he saw something in me that my own family never had. Our romance became the bright spot in my increasingly bleak life. A year later, we were engaged. Predictably, my family's response was patronizing. "At least she found someone successful," Mom remarked when we announced the news. "Maybe now she'll quit working." Sarah smirked. "Claire loves being a servant. Let her have her little hobbies." James squeezed my hand under the table, silently reassuring me. "They don't see your worth, but I do." Our wedding was small, nothing like Sarah's extravagant affair the year before, when she married a politician's son. My parents contributed only enough to maintain appearances. On the morning of my wedding, a courier arrived with a thick envelope. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. Grandpa Jack. My hands trembled as I opened it. He had passed away 3 months earlier, his death sudden, a heart attack in his sleep. The family had been shocked when no formal will surfaced, just instructions that his lawyers would handle his assets. I unfolded the letter. "My dearest Claire. If you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I'm no longer here, and you're marrying someone you love. I wish I could walk you down the aisle, but I hope this letter serves as my final gift to you." Tears blurred my vision as I read on. "I've watched your parents and sister underestimate you your entire life. They mistake kindness for weakness, attention to detail for simplicity, hard work for servitude, but I saw the truth. I saw myself in you, the same drive, the same understanding of what makes a business thrive, taking care of people. What they don't know is that I never actually transferred ownership of Montgomery Family Restaurants to your father. The company was always mine. Through a holding company, Eagle Ridge Enterprises, I remained the majority owner. Your father only managed operations, believing he was in control, but he was never anything more than an employee." I gasped, my hands shaking. Eagle Ridge Enterprises. I'd seen the name on documents before but never questioned its significance. "Today, on your wedding day, ownership of Eagle Ridge Enterprises transfers to you. Claire, you are now the majority owner of Montgomery Family Restaurants." The lawyers had all the paperwork ready. My father, mother, and sister had been employees this entire time, and now, they worked for me. I had to sit down, my wedding dress rustling around me, but there was more. "I couldn't stand watching them crush your spirit, but I needed to be sure you were ready." Grandpa's words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I needed you to learn humility, to understand every aspect of the business from the ground up. Most importantly, I needed you to find someone who values you for who you are, not for what they can get from you. Show them what real leadership looks like, Claire. Show them what you've always been capable of. And remember, sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about rising above. All my love, Grandpa Jack. P.S. There's a board meeting scheduled for Monday morning, don't be late, CEO. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. An email from Grandpa's lawyers confirmed everything: the ownership transfer, the board meeting agenda, and, most shocking of all, evidence of Sarah's mismanagement. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. Claire, are you ready? James' voice was steady, but there was something else in it. Your family's making a scene outside. Raised voices carried from the garden where the ceremony was supposed to take place. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and opened the door. James took one look at my face and knew. Everything okay? He asked softly. Wordlessly, I handed him the letter. His eyes flicked over the pages, widening with each line. Then, slowly, he smiled. Well, he said, slipping an arm around my waist, this explains why your father is outside yelling about an emergency board meeting notification. I laced my fingers with his, strength surging through me. Shall we deal with this before our wedding? James chuckled. Lead the way, CEO. The moment they never saw coming, the garden fell silent as I stepped into the sunlight, Grandpa's letter in hand. Dad stood red-faced, his phone clenched in one fist. Mom smoothed her designer dress, a nervous habit she had when things slipped out of her control, and Sarah's perfectly made-up face twisted in confusion. What is going on? She shrieked. Why are we getting notifications about an emergency board meeting? And why? Her voice rose hysterically. Does it list you as CEO? I let the moment stretch. Looking at them, really looking at them, for the first time, I didn't feel small under their gaze. Because that's what I am, I said evenly, holding up Grandpa's letter. Would you like to read what he had to say? Dad snatched the paper from my hands. Mom and Sarah crowded around him, their faces draining of color as they read. The wedding guests, caught between stunned fascination and second-hand embarrassment, whispered amongst themselves. This is impossible, Dad muttered, but the doubt in his voice betrayed him. He knew it was real. Eagle Ridge Enterprises, he whispered, almost to himself. All this time. I nodded. You were just an employee, a manager, just like me. Sarah lunged forward, eyes blazing. You planned this. You tricked Grandpa. James stepped in smoothly. Sarah, your grandfather built a restaurant empire from nothing. Do you really think he was easily fooled? Or maybe, just maybe, he knew exactly what he was doing? Her mouth snapped shut. I took a deep breath, shifting my focus back to the people who had spent years underestimating me. The board meeting is Monday at 9 a.m. I said, my voice steady. I expect everyone to be there. Then I turned to the guests, smiled, and said, but right now, I'm getting married. Sarah let out a strangled noise of frustration. You can't do this to me. I'm the CEO. I have contracts, commitments, all of which will be reviewed on Monday. I replied coolly. Now, you can either stay for the wedding as my family, or you can leave. Your choice. They left. Of course they did. Mom stopped only long enough to say, you'll regret this, Claire. You're not ready for this responsibility. I watched them walk away, feeling lighter than I had in years. James took my hand, and we had our wedding, smaller than planned, but somehow more perfect. For all the chaos, our guests couldn't stop talking about what they'd just witnessed. And I couldn't stop smiling. Monday morning, I walked into Montgomery Family Restaurants headquarters wearing a simple but professional outfit. Not flashy like Sarah's designer labels, just me. The security guard did a double take as I headed for the executive elevator. Then, realizing, he scrambled to hold the door open. The boardroom was already full when I stepped inside, exactly at 9 a.m. Dad sat in the CEO's chair, Sarah beside him, both pretending the weekend hadn't happened. The board members, most of them Grandpa's old friends, watched with quiet amusement as I approached. You're in my seat, I said, my voice calm but firm. Dad opened his mouth, but before he could argue, Mr. Pearson, Grandpa's oldest friend on the board, stood up. Robert, he said, voice firm, I believe you'll find your daughter is correct. We've reviewed the documentation. Eagle Ridge Enterprises has always held majority ownership. He turned to me and gave a slow, Approving nod. Welcome to your first board meeting, Miss Montgomery. Claire is its sole owner. She's our CEO now. The next hour was a blur of paperwork and signatures. Sarah stormed out halfway through, but not before I'd rescinded her executive access and compensation package. Dad sat through it all, his face growing grimmer with each document, each revelation that further shattered his delusion about his position in the company. Now, I said once the legalities were handled, let's talk about the company's performance over the past few months. I pulled up a presentation I'd prepared, detailing the sharp decline in profits, questionable expenses, and the growing list of customer complaints ignored under Sarah's leadership. We've lost 15% of our regular customers. Staff turnover has increased by 40%. 3 of our most profitable locations are operating at a loss. The board members nodded solemnly, their faces betraying the quiet frustration they'd felt but had never been able to voice. Here's my plan to turn things around, I continued, outlining strategies I'd been developing for years. We're going back to basics: quality food, excellent service, and taking care of our people. Every executive will spend 1 week per quarter working in our restaurants, including me. We're reinstating Grandpa's employee education program and expanding it. I could see the board members' approval in their eyes, several of them smiling as I laid out my vision. Even Dad seemed surprised by the depth of my understanding, his posture softening just slightly. The next few months were intense. I worked harder than I ever had, spending time in every restaurant, engaging with staff at all levels, from dishwashers to managers. James was right there beside me, his tech expertise helping modernize our systems while ensuring Grandpa's core values remained intact. Sarah tried her best to sabotage me, spreading rumors about how I had stolen the company, but the truth was easy to prove, and her credibility swiftly vanished as our restaurants began to thrive under my leadership. Mom and Dad took longer to come around, watching from the sidelines as profits climbed, employee satisfaction soared, and the culture in our restaurants shifted back to one of respect and dedication. Dad, despite everything, remained in his position. I hadn't fired him because, despite his flaws, he was skilled at operations, when he wasn't distracted by status and image. The real turning point came 6 months later. The diner. I was working the dinner shift at Grandpa's original diner, something I did regularly to stay connected to our roots. When they came in, they sat in their usual booth, looking uncomfortable as I approached with menus. "Welcome to Jack's," I said professionally. "Today's special is Grandpa's famous meatloaf." "Claire," Mom began, her voice hesitant, but she stopped herself, glancing around the restaurant. Every table was full, the staff moved with purpose, smiling genuinely, the atmosphere buzzed with an energy I hadn't seen before. "The place looks good," she said, her voice almost soft. "It is good," I replied, my voice steady. "All our locations are. Profits are up 25% from last year, staff turnover is at an all-time low, and we're opening 2 new restaurants next month." Dad cleared his throat, looking uneasy. He shifted in his seat, the reality finally sinking in. "We were wrong," he admitted after a long pause. "About you, about everything. Your grandfather, he knew exactly what he was doing." I nodded, the weight of Grandpa's keys still heavy in my pocket. They were the same keys he'd given me when I started as a dishwasher at 14, a symbol of how far I had come. "He taught me that success isn't about looking important," I said quietly. "It's about being important to your people." Mom hesitated. "And Sarah?" I paused, then answered with quiet resolve. "She's welcome to apply for an entry-level position, same as anyone else. If she wants to be a part of this, she'll have to work her way up." They nodded slowly, understanding finally settling over them like a shroud of truth. I took their orders and went back to work, leaving them in the space they once controlled, now processing the magnitude of how thoroughly their simple daughter had transformed their world. Later that night, after closing, I sat in Grandpa's old office, my office now, staring at his picture on the wall. The letter he'd given me on my wedding day was framed beside it. James came in with a cup of coffee and sat next to me, his presence a constant source of support. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, his voice soft, knowing that even in moments of victory, I carried a quiet reflection. I smiled, touching the frame of Grandpa's picture, just thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about proving them wrong, by being exactly who you always were. "And who is that?" James asked, already knowing the answer. "The girl who loved this business enough to start as a dishwasher, the woman who knows every employee's name, The CEO who still works dinner shifts. I stood, gathering my things. Come on, let's go home. We're hosting the employee scholarship dinner tomorrow, and I want to make Grandpa's famous apple pie for it. As we left, I paused in front of the original diner sign Grandpa had hung in the lobby. Montgomery Family Restaurants, where everyone is family. And finally, after all this time, it was true. The next morning, I arrived early to find Sarah waiting in the lobby. She looked different, simpler, without her usual expensive clothes and perfect makeup. She just looked human. She held a job application in her hands, her expression vulnerable. "I'd like to apply for a server position," she said quietly, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it, "if that's okay." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Humility. "Training starts Monday at 7 a.m. I said, taking the application from her hand. "Don't be late." Sometimes, family has to fall apart completely before it can be rebuilt into something stronger. And sometimes, the person they called simple turns out to be the one who can put it all back together. Grandpa had known that all along. And now, finally, so did everyone else.